Nicolas Maduro promises to defeat what he calls a crazed minority. But could Venezuela's self-declared interim leader trigger a popular uprising? I'm Imran Garda, and today's newsmaker is Juan Guaido. Venezuela's opposition leader is back. On Monday, Juan Guaido arrived in Caracas after defying a travel ban to drum up support across Latin America. He was looking for support for a campaign to depose the nation's socialist president. But Nicolas Maduro isn't backing down. He's pledged to defeat his rival and those he says are determined to destabilize the country. And while he doesn't have many friends in the West, President Maduro still has support elsewhere in the world. So how will this power struggle be resolved? For more, here's Natalie Perhonen.
It's an audience fit for a rock star. Opposition leader Juan Guaido commands a loyal following in the battle for the hearts and minds of the Venezuelan public. Despite a court-imposed travel ban, he toured South America to drum up support for the opposition. It meant he faced potential arrest upon his return. But in the end, all he encountered was a legion of supporters.
They threatened all of us who are here. You saw it, with prison, with death. And I say something to them. It has not been through persecution. It will not be through threats that they are going to stop us. Here we are, and we are stronger and more united than ever. Here we are, and we're much stronger than ever.
More than 50 countries now recognize Guaido as the interim president. He has been able to unify a traditionally fractious opposition. Unlike previous opposition leaders who have been arrested or jailed, he remains free to continue his calls for President Nicolas Maduro to step down. Maduro hasn't publicly acknowledged his rival's homecoming. But he did choose the anniversary of former President Hugo Chávez's death to declare victory against imperialist aggression and to call out the opposition.
Mientras una minoría alocada continúa con su odio, con su amargura, allá ellos. Ni les paremos bolas, compatriotas. Vamos a pararles al trabajo, al estudio, a la unión nacional. A ellos ni les paremos bola. Que siga la minoría alocada en su amargura. Los vamos a derrotar. Tengan la seguridad absoluta. Por Chávez lo haremos. Por la historia grande de la patria lo haremos.
Venezuela's opposition is now changing its tactics to put renewed pressure on Maduro. Originally, it had called on the military to drop its support for the government. Now it's urging public sector workers to go on strike.
We're going to build up the capacities to stop collaboration with the dictatorship so that public workers are not forced to cooperate anymore or be forced to do anything. So listen well. We're going to do a staggered strike in public administration permanently.
It's a bold move. These are the same people who are a key part of Maduro's supporter base. The president says he won't allow anything or anyone to disrupt the peace.
No podemos caer en provocaciones nunca. Allá ellos. Que sigan con su juego de muchachos en sus provocaciones. Acá nosotros, la patria. Acá nosotros, el pueblo.
With the government and the opposition committed to different approaches to end this political crisis, protests, not peace, appear a more likely outcome for the nation. Natalie Perhonen, The Newsmakers.
Well, joining me now in New York is Diego Aria. He's a Venezuelan politician and a former representative to the UN. He was also with Juan Guaido and accompanied him at the Colombian border. Sir, thank you very much for joining us here on the Newsmakers. Were you surprised that Guaido was not arrested upon his return?
No, I was not. I even made a statement saying that the regime would not dare to put his hands on top of him, would not dare to touch him because of the international repercussions and the fear that some countries might take some harsher actions.
Mm-hmm. Now that he's back, Guaido has called on his supporters to mobilize on Saturday because, as he said in a tweet, all the support we have and all the support we need will depend on whether we stay in the streets. He wants strikes. He wants people to paralyze the public sector. How can that be helpful when people are struggling to find food to eat, to paralyze the public sector? Isn't that going to lead to more suffering?
Well, the public sector is not producing anything. The public sector, on the contrary, is very heavy on the many people that are completely unneeded. And it is important that after returning to Venezuela, we continue the pressure on the regime. And the only pressure that you can have a civilian population that is not armed is actually stopping many of the regime's activities. The only way. And it will keep the pressure and the enthusiasm of people that for about 90% reject the Maduro regime.
As a supporter of Guaido and as somebody who's pushing for change, there's a belief from Maduro and his supporters that while people are suffering, you and Guaido and your allies and the United States and others are weaponizing the need for humanitarian change. You're weaponizing the idea of humanitarian aid as a guise for regime change. Address that for me, please, sir.
Well, that's absolutely absurd. To weaponize food, actually, the regime is doing that. The little food that there is in the country, they use it to provide to some of the people who they believe are their followers. No, a humanitarian assistance being called by the international community as a right action to take. The United Nations, the Food Program, the European Union, the United States, everybody. The only one who came up with that absurd idea of weaponizing food is the Maduro regime.
And the UN Secretary General Guterres has said that he wants all parties to conduct dialogue to end the political impasse. Of course, the cynic would say this is what the UN Secretary General would say, whether it's Guterres or Kofi Annan or Ban Ki-moon or whoever. But let me ask you, sincerely, would you sit down with Maduro and try to resolve this with dialogue?
You know, you were absolutely right. Any Secretary General, any diplomat are forced to use a sort of the decalogue. Negotiations, sit at the table, both parties must negotiate. You know, we have tried that in the last 3 or 4 years. Venezuelan politicians have attempted to sit at the table. But you know something? It is very difficult to sit down when there is no government on the other side. When there is a band of criminals, many of them linked to narco-trafficking, and it is very difficult and actually unprecedented to sit down and speak to a regime that has morphed into a narco state. It is actually a very hard thing to do.
Was it a mistake in declaring Guaido president from your side?
According to our constitution, actually, when Guaido became the president of the National Assembly, he swore that he was going to fulfill his duties. So when he became automatically the president, when there was a void, a vacuum in the power, already he was sworn in to do that. Maybe he should have done it also, but he's not self-proclaimed. He was proclaimed by the Venezuelan constitution that automatically declared him president as soon as Maduro was out.
Maduro believes that the United States is behind a coup attempt using Guaido, using you and all the other Venezuelans who are anti-Maduro. Your response to that is what?
Well, the Maduro regime, as Chavez before, have been saying that for almost 20 years. They blame the United States on anything that happens in Venezuela, even though the United States is the only country that pays for the oil that Venezuela produces. That's not the case. You know, the countries, for example, the United States, have been trying to push him through sanctions. But it's not only the United States. And now many of the countries of the European Union, many of the countries in Latin America are enforcing sanctions because they see Venezuela as a threat, not only to us, the Venezuelans, but a threat to regional stability.
Are you afraid that all of this might lead to civil war? Because both sides are doubling down?
No, really. You know, I've seen civil wars, and it's not the case in Venezuela, where you only have one side is armed, fully armed, not only with the armed forces. Because remember, we don't have armed forces. The government of the regime, the Venezuelan regime, is a military regime, and the civilians are completely unarmed. So a civil war only takes place when both sides are armed. That's not the case in Venezuela.
And what do you make of the fact that while Guaido is calling for strikes and demonstrations, Maduro is calling for strikes or demonstrations to counter them as well, anti-imperialist demonstrations? Aren't we going to see trouble on the streets?
No, every time that the opposition lead protests in the streets, immediately the regime tries to do the same at the same hour, the same day, but there's no way they can actually counter that. When you have a rejection of almost 90% of the country that is against you, you'll find very little people. And actually, the few people who attended the regime's protests were public members of the public administration. They will start disappearing soon, and you will see how thin is the support that the narco regime of Maduro has today.
As an experienced diplomat, somebody who's supporting Guaido, yes, we see that the United States, many of the Europeans, the Colombians, the Brazilians, the Argentinians, they are supporting Guaido. But what's your message as a diplomat to those who are supporting President Maduro, to the countries such as Turkey, to the countries such as Russia? What's your message to them?
You know, to see Russia has attempted to include Venezuela into a sort of a Cold War to confront the United States using the case of Venezuela. I think the Russians couldn't care less for us, for our welfare, whether we starve or not. They care to see if they can carve a niche in the Western Hemisphere to try to confront in one way or another the United States. China more moderate and more moderate in its attitude than Russia, but Russia really is really unforgivable what they have done. Actually, recently in the Security Council, it looked more a confrontation with the United States than a defense of the Venezuelan cause or the Maduro regime.
Diego Aria, thank you very much for joining us here on the Newsmakers. Well, let's bring in two new guests now. Joining us now from Toronto is Alessandra Polga. She's the Canada spokeswoman for the opposition Venta Venezuela party. And in Caracas, we have Paul Dobson. He's a journalist at Venezuela Analysis. Thanks both of you for joining us. Paul, you heard the interview with Diego Aria. Do you disagree with him?
I would, on a number of factors. Here in Venezuela, I think we see and feel very different power dynamics, maybe from what he sees and feels in his base outside of the country. I think it's very important to highlight that any basic reading of the Venezuelan constitution, I mean basic here is in a quick reading, deeper reading even more so, will show that there is basically no constitutional groundwork for Juan Guaido to be named president. For him to be named interim president, he would have to prove with evidence that there is an abandonment of power. And this obviously hasn't happened. I think it's very important that we don't confuse the fact that maybe Diego Arias and Juan Guaido don't like the policies of Nicolas Maduro and the fact that there are policies, there is a president, there is actions, there is a government taking place here in Venezuela. So to claim that there is an abandonment of power is, in my mind, entirely political and has no constitutional grounding whatsoever.
Alessandra Polga, there's no abandonment of power. That's why Guaido is illegitimate, according to Paul. What do you make of that?
I completely disagree with what he said, because our constitution is very clear. More than 52 countries, they did not recognize the sham election that tried to do that Maduro did last year in 2018. Because first of all, the election had to be called for the National Assembly and then had to be notified for the Minister of Election, that's CNE. And what has not happened is something that Maduro announced on TV, and then the director of the CNA called for the election. There is not international observation, is outside of the rule of law in Venezuela. And the result is the more than 52 countries, including 11 countries of the Organizations of American States and Europe, and not just, again, that continue with the topic of the United States, but many countries reject the results. And when you don't have a new president elected in our constitution under the Article 233 and 333 and 350, you can allow that, and you need to cover the power, the absence of power.
Right. Okay, so I just want to sort of move beyond the question of political legitimacy and the legalities of it, because there's clearly a reality on the ground of a very divided nation. Well, according to Diego Aria, 90% of the people are actually against Maduro. It's difficult for us to actually figure that one out and verify that. But Alessandra, what we have is Nicolas Maduro saying, I'm president, I'm not going to step down. So then what? What for your movement? If he's going to stay in his role no matter what are you going to do?
Of course, he's going to try to keep the power, because we have to remember that it's not a democratic government, it's a criminal state, it's a regime. Those guys are involved, deeply involved in international criminal. The cousins of his wife, they are detained. They are in jail right now in the United States for trafficking drugs. And more of the high ranks of the army are related with this cartel, the cartel of the soles. It's because is the symbol of the general, the soles in the shoulders. And they are related with the international terrorism. It's very proof for many reports around the world that we are on a training place from Hezbollah and Hamas, and that thing started with the Vice President Tarek al-Aissami, that he's really directed with Hamas and Hezbollah, and they are now trafficking not just with drugs. They are trafficking with weapons. They are trafficking with people, and then they are in a threat from the hemisphere. That is the reason why they had to be in the power to protect his life.
Okay, so Paul Dobson, Alessandra paints this picture of not a government, but basically a cabal of narco traffickers, right? And that's the view from the opposition. You're an outsider living in Venezuela for a period of time. Is that what you see?
Listen, I think it's very important to try and be objective here. No, obviously, if you speak to a politician on Juan Guaido's side, or a representative, as Alessandra is, they will give you the line of Juan Guaido, and from far away, what they are told by their allies is happening here. Here on the ground in Venezuela, as an objective, independent observer, things are very different, I think. In all of my time in Venezuela, I've never seen any Hamas or Hezbollah training camp. And it's also worth pointing out that both Hamas and Hezbollah are legal political parties in their countries. No? So here in Venezuela, what we do see is one reality based on the streets, based on concrete facts, and at times a different reality, which is what is discussed in the White House, which is what is discussed in Bogota.
Okay, so in terms of the reality, Paul, what is the reality? Is the reality that Maduro's government has wrecked the economy and that's why we are where we are and that's why the country is divided? Or is it everything that he says it is, that it's an outside plot?
I would say it's probably a combination of both. Being objective about it, there are obviously cases of malmanagement of the economy, but there is also very clear evidence of the impact of hoarding, of extraction smuggling, and also of the US-led sanctions against the economy. The US-led oil embargo, which was announced in January, is due to cost the Venezuelan economy $30 million a day. And at the same time, the US pretend to send about just $20 million of so-called aid into the country. So here we can really see the impact of the sanctions on the Venezuelan economy. Obviously, the economy is not helped by issues like corruption and mismanagement, But I think if we blame just the US government or just the Maduro government, it's far too simplistic.
Okay, Alessandra, is Paul an objective observer?
We have to be clear in many points. First of all, the first sanctions that the government to Venezuela are against personals and individuals person. It's not for economical sanctions. Just recently, 15 days ago, is the one directly for the income and the revenue come from Citgo. 15 days. We have the list. The list as following the list. It's the sanction who apply United States are following for Canada and are following for some countries in Europe. I have the list. And secondly, we are not talking. Why is the reason we are in this point in Venezuela? Because we have a huge level of corruption in Venezuela, a lack of proper administration. Before, when Chavez won in 1999, we received $12 per barrel, and after and in 2000, Chavez started to receive $170 per barrel. And then they disappear all the income, and that price it's stay in the market probably for 6 years. And they stolen everything. You have the high level corruption in the war.
Okay.
Right now.
Okay.
And
okay.
because they just a second, let me finish a little bit. I'm going to be fast. Sorry. And because they arrest the national production, they have to be forced to import everything. And because they own money to every company around the world because they stole the resources, that is the shortest that we have right now in Venezuela.
Paul, when Guaido says, quote, they thought the pressure had reached its zenith, but it's only just beginning, what does that mean to you?
It sounds to me like politicians talk. When you look at the events of the last month and a half, it's my evaluation that Guaido is actually losing political momentum. This is also backed up by the fact that the government decided not to take any legal steps against him when he re-entered the country on Monday, clearly not seeing him as any sort of real threat. When we look at the promises which Guaido has made to the country, he hasn't actually been able to fulfill a single one of those. When we look at the reaction of the Lima group in Bogota a few weeks ago, they actually turned their back.
Paul, how does he fulfill
How
does he fulfill the promises if he's not in charge?
Well, this is a point. He declared himself president, yet he's no closer to actually being the president. He hasn't explained to anyone how he pretends to actually take control of any of the institutions of state or the power of the country. He hasn't laid out any sort of roadmap where we see a plausible way for him to actually do this. So his supporters here on the ground are starting to think, is this just another man who speaks a good talk but doesn't really fulfill what we want to happen?
Okay, fragile situation in Venezuela. For the moment, he's back. He's on the streets. He's called for that strike all over the weekend. We'll be keeping a close eye on it and possibly having another look at Venezuela next week. But for the moment, let me thank both of you, Alessandra Polga and Paul Dobson, and earlier Diego Aria. Thanks for joining us on the Newsmakers. Still to come on the program, Haitians demand the president resign. We ask Haiti's foreign minister about alleged government corruption and what American mercenaries were doing in his country. And could these creepy crawlies be on the verge of extinction? And why would that spell disaster for our survival?
Responsable de partis politiques.
To citizens, responsible political parties, civil society, the industrial sector, peace is necessary for dialogue. Now is the right moment for state officials and for every citizen to take responsibility for Haiti and for the well-being of our nation.
Haiti may have fallen out of the headlines, but the country remains on edge after a month of anti-government protests. Demonstrators have been calling for the resignation of President Jovenel Moïse since the start of February. He's accused of misusing funds meant for development, and protesters argue corruption has destroyed the economy. President Moïse has launched a committee for national dialogue, saying talks are the only way out of the crisis, but opposition leaders have called for an independent investigation into missing aid money. Meanwhile, a group of heavily armed Americans were arrested in Haiti and sent back to the US amid rumors of a criminal conspiracy. Well, to discuss all this, let's speak to Haiti's Foreign Minister, Bokshi Edmond, who joins me now from Port-au-Prince. Bokshi, good to have you back on the Newsmakers, this time as Foreign Minister. The last time we had you from London. Pleasure having you on the show. We've been watching developments in your country very closely. We've seen those massive protests on the streets, the reports of a massive jailbreak, the deaths on the streets. All is not well. Is your country facing big problems right now?
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be back on your show. So I need to tell you that there is a description you gave at the beginning of your interview, of my interview. We need to clarify that President Moïse has not is not being accused of misusing the funds of Petro-Caribbean. Petro-Caribbean was long before President Moïse arrived in office, but unfortunately, he has a responsibility to carry out justice in terms of clarifying or looking exactly what happened with that money. But I should tell you that the request of the youth, this is a legitimate request to have clarifications or to have more explanation on what happened. But unfortunately, we need to tell you that those peaceful movements have been unfortunately hijacked by radical groups, and all those devastation you've seen, and I can see your viewers
yes.
are seeing now, they are not part of a peaceful protest, particularly of those who have asked for clarification on the misuse of Petro-Caribbean funds.
Right. Yeah. So sorry to interrupt. Yeah, certainly. And we want absolute clarity. Yes. So now the protest began when the Senate, right? I mean, I don't need to tell you the story. You know the story. But for the sake of our viewers, the Senate conducted that investigation. The president was at the center of it, right? They're looking for a connection between the presidency and the misuse of funds. And the people on the streets want answers because they believe billions have been misused. That discount was supposed to go to aid and development to help rebuild after the earthquake and so on and so forth. And that was misused. The people want answers. Bokshi, Minister, are they going to get answers?
Of course they have to get answers because, as I told you at the beginning, it is legitimate for those people, for the Haitian people, particularly the youth, to ask for, a clarification and how that money was spent and why that money was spent the way it was spent. It is legitimate. I said that. But as you know, in any country, we do have what they call the due process. Mm-hmm. The president is certainly the guarantor of the functioning of all institutions of the country, but the justice is an independent body. The justice has to do what they have to do, and the High Court of Accounting already gave a report on what happened. Certainly now it's very important for the justice system to step in, as they already stepped in, so they can carry out the investigation and share light on exactly what happened. But this is what I'm saying. So, we are not saying here at the government that the request of the people is not legitimate. Certainly this is a legitimate request, but there is a legal process to be followed.
Okay, and that's been heard loud and clear. Now, a lot of people read the news and wonder what the hell is going on with the 5 Americans who were arrested, because they weren't just ordinary Americans, ex-Navy SEALs, ex-Marines. They had weapons, drones, satellite phones in their vehicles. It's like an episode of The Punisher for people. They don't know what's going on. Why are these Americans there? Who are they working for? What the hell were they doing amid the protests? Do you have any idea as the foreign minister?
Unfortunately, I wish I could give you an exact answer of why they were here. But I know the Minister of Justice, particularly with regards to those foreign citizens that were arrested. I believe they have been released, but I cannot tell you exactly why, the reason they were arrested. But I can tell you it's a matter of, it's a legal issue that I don't really manage.
But certainly,
so
I mean, I understand.
I cannot clearly tell you exactly what happened.
And from my end, if it was an active legal issue within Haiti, I would stand down. I wouldn't even ask you about it, you know, because I don't want to interfere with that process. But your Minister of Justice authorized the sending of the group back to the United States and said that they must stand trial. So that was done. But they're not standing trial in the US and they've been set free. So has that been a disappointment to your government?
To some extent, I believe it might be a disappointment for a lot of people. But unfortunately, I don't want to go deeper into this because I really don't have those facts. But I can refer you to particularly to the U.S. authorities. They might tell you exactly why they're being released, why they are not being able to stand trial on the states. What I can figure out, I might figure out that they did not commit any crime on the U.S. territory. Therefore, the lawyers might put that as a defense. This is my guess, but I will refer you to the U.S. authorities to find out exactly what
clearly,
was the issue.
you'd be asking the U.S. authorities for answers here. The Haitian people will be asking for answers. You have these foreigners who are heavily armed and professionally trained mercenaries, ex-SEALs, ex-Marines. A Serb was amongst them, an additional Haitian. They're arrested in the midst of demonstrations, sent to the U.S., set free. Can you understand the anger of your people?
Of course, but I'm not in a position to qualify them as mercenaries or whatsoever because I don't know. I can tell you that the people, most of the sectors, they are not happy about it. It is a fact. But I think we'll continue to find out, to discuss and talk with those responsible to find out what exactly happened.
Do you know, but you're not allowed to tell us, or do you not know?
I do not know.
Okay, because the U.S. Department of State issued that level 4 travel warning after the arrest of these men. Do not travel to Haiti due to crime and civil unrest. What was their intention behind that? Were they threatening you?
No, not really. I believe I mean, first of all, that decision of the U.S. to put a category for it is it's a very bad warning. It is not in the interest of the country. It has been a hit for the tourism sector, and I don't think it was appropriate to do that. But it's not after the arrest of those five people. This is something they always put whenever there is some political disturbances, not only in Haiti, but many places. But our surprise was to see Haiti to be considered as countries at war, to get a category 4. It was really regretful. And we said that to the Undersecretary of State, David Hale, who was in Haiti last week. We expressed that to him, and we expressed our discontent on this decision. And I believe the most important thing to be done at this level is for us Haitians to sit down and seek a solution to come back to normalcy.
What was his response to you, sir? Bakshi, what was his response to you?
You know, the response always been the same. It's a duty of the State Department to issue those statements to inform the American citizens. They are not telling them not to come, but they just warn them something is happening, and it's up to them to decide to come or not. But at the end of the day, that decision really borders us, and it hit our tourism sector that is trying to be, to revive itself. So we just don't like it. Mm-hmm. We express our discontent to them, and then we believe this issue will be considered differently. And at the same time, we recognize we Haitians, we need to sit down and look for a solution for our country.
Right.
Because it is not in our interest to see, for instance, the work we've been doing for the last 8 years to put Haiti's back again on the international tourism sector has been, disappear in less than 1 week.
As foreign minister, is a lot of your job to try and encourage foreign investment to shore up the economy? Is that at the heart of what you're trying to do?
Absolutely. It is. It has been very. It has made my job even more difficult, because once you are trying to convince foreign investors mm-hmm. and to come to your country, and a country where there are a lot of potentialities, but when those foreign investors, they are seeing those kind of level of violence into the country, it's really discouraged them. So there is an issue here. We cannot talk about foreign and direct investment without political stability. And if we keep showing that political instability in our own country, it certainly will push those foreign investors away. But that's why we believe it is the president has decided to launch a national dialogue. Mm-hmm. So between us Haitians, we can come to a common ground where the national interest will be put first, or the personal interest or political parties. So I can express to you, and I can reiterate, that the president is really willing to sit down and with all parties, all sectors, and to discuss every matter, all issues, so we can come to a common ground, so the country's interests will be put first.
Foreign Minister of Haiti, Bokshi Edmond, always a pleasure having you on the Newsmakers. Thank you so much for taking the time.
It has been a pleasure to be with you again, and hopefully I'll be back for a better reason instead of showing those issues.
Oh, well, very soon. Well, we'll keep a close eye. We care a lot about Haiti on this show. Thanks so much again.
Bees aren't doing well, honeybees aren't doing well, and wild bees are even worse off.
10 quintillion, that's the number of insects on Earth right now. Sounds like a lot, and it is, of course, but experts warn that number could dramatically drop, and the consequences could be catastrophic. In the last 4 billion years, wildlife is believed to have been annihilated 5 times, and studies show it's happening again, only this time it's our fault. So why is it a big deal? Well, pesky flies and stinging wasps are simply a nuisance, right? But without them, you and I can't survive, especially since insects are responsible for about 1/3 of all food produced across the globe. So what can we do about it? Well, to discuss this, we're joined now by Rami Oleik, who's a professor of beekeeping at the American University of Beirut. Rami, good to have you on the program. So the journal Biological Conservation came out with this shocking information. They said that more than 40% of insect species around the world are threatened to be extinct within the next few decades. When you came across that news, what was your immediate reaction?
Well, again, thanks for having me. The bee has become the symbol of the environment because it's under the spotlight, and much studies have been done about that, which tells us about what's happening to honeybees specifically, but not to many other insect species, which are all believed to become endangered. And basically, it's not just about honey when we talk about honeybees. It's about us. It's about the food chain that we sit on top of. And as you said, if we go, we're taking you with us. That's what the bees are saying to us. And I need to quote Einstein here. If bees are wiped off the face of Earth, then man would have only 4 years to live. So basically, it's all about pollination, what the bees do. Honeybees are believed to be the most efficient pollinators on Earth. And basically, to put it simple, no bees means no pollination. No pollination means no plants. No plants means no animals. No plants and animals means no us. That's the thing. Now, that's really scary. And, well, much effort has been put to dig into the root cause of that, but there's no single conclusive finding. Rather, it's a combo of different factors that we humans can really realize. And scientists have come with a set of possible causes that has been leading to the bee vanishing, which is dubbed as colony collapse disorder. Some of them are global warming, climate change, pollution, deforestation, monocultures, the use of GMOs, bee management itself. And while we can see all that, I mean, bees don't have enough habitat, to go and forage in, and basically they are just losing their sense of orientation due to the mixed signals. Honeybees are known to have an excellent sense of orientation. The single bee goes out of her hive in all possible directions and then comes back from miles away to the very location of her hive entrance. This is not happening. What's happening on the other side is like mass bee foragers going out of the hive, and they're not coming back. Beekeepers are leaving their hives supposedly healthy, no signs of diseases, good enough food stores, still no bees are found there, all disappeared. Sometimes just the queen and a handful of bees.
Right.
So this is the story, and to sum it up, it's like the honeybee is nature's bad messenger to us. And because the bee is sensitive and she was able to witness all that and get affected, the bee is raising a red flag to humans and saying, stop there, stop being greedy, stop messing with your ecosystem, with the environment, because if you don't do that, sooner or later, we will be gone. A lot of insect species would be gone, and then you'll pay the consequences, humans.
So a whole bunch of insect species are on the verge of extinction, or at least dramatic decline, right? And we know that, especially through your very elegant and eloquent exposition there, that the honeybee is the driving force behind all agriculture and the entire food chain. So we know this, and we have colony collapse. But until we have absolute clarity about what's the specific cause, how can we actually come up with a solution? If it's a little bit of this and a little bit of that and multiple factors, how do we actually have a policy that we can live by in order to fix things?
Well, basically, it starts from each and every one of us. We have to have enough awareness to treat this environment or the ecosystem we're living in a better way. Well, one of the possible causes are pesticides, and specifically some systemic pesticides of the category neonicotinoids. And a lot of awareness have developed lately in Europe and developed countries as well, other developed countries, and a ban has been in effect against 5 types of pesticides, which basically are considered to cause the death of bees. I mean, policy makers and such measures would help a lot. Still, it is up to, again, each and every one of us. I mean, bees need like foraging places. They need greenery around. They need clean environment. The bee is very sensitive. What's happening is she's losing her sense of orientation because of all that. So we need to reverse this cycle, and we need to approach the environment in a different way. And not only this, a very important lesson learned from the bees is that we need to visit our food system, our current agricultural system. You know, we teach at colleges, we tell students to go into profit-making, mechanization, monocultures, you know. That's the motive now, which is basically has proven wrong. And the bee was the main cause to give us the heads up to go and investigate all that. And these days, there's a trend of revisiting the whole food system in the world because of what the bees have alarmed us about. And we have to come up with a more friendly environment. Now, there's like a lot of policies and a lot of programs that go for friendly farming, bee-friendly farming, discouragement of the monocultures, staying away from genetically modified organisms, even the use of pesticides. It's a big industry, and it's a lot of politics and lobbying here. But yeah, this is something also that we have to deal with. All these things would help in reversing this dramatic cycle. And I know like the efforts that have been employed are not enough so far, so much more needs to be employed and needs to be done to at least, get to a point where we can have a ground to effectively reverse this cycle. And here, there's like a discrepancy between industrialized countries, dubbed as developed countries, and developing countries. And the problem is exacerbated with developing countries because of the lack of data, statistics, effective policies, all that stuff, which is complicating the issue more, and which is leading to a state of, well, we can't do anything. On the contrary, the use of chemicals, pesticides, and where we don't have alternatives in developing countries specifically is getting more and more into the fore, and this is worsening the case.
Okay, and Rami, this has been a broad range of problems that you have diagnosed here, and of course you're looking at possible solutions. It's been fascinating, and a lot of us, I think, we underestimate just how much we need bees in our lives and just how much this means to all of us and I guess our civilization. Now, one of the things that happens on this program, Rami, is when a guest appears, your name will appear on screen. A lot of our viewers will punch your name into Google and they'll have a look at your background, right? And something that we found was fascinating about you, and I'm going to take a little political turn here, is that before you were doing this, you were a member of Hezbollah. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, that's quite a different angle. Like you said, well, I grew up in South Lebanon, the Hezbollah land, to a family of rich heritage in beekeeping. My late dad was like, I owe it to him, my passion for bees. And basically, it was a wartime and a lot of displacement, you know, going from one place to a safer place. And the only constant in my life was the bees, you know. We were like carrying them with us, the beehives, wherever we go. And, the bees teach you a lot of lessons when it comes to real life, you know, the order, the fascination, and their amazing structure, division of labor, specialization of task. Well, basically, when I look at all these within Hezbollah, I kind of like find some relevance to what I was doing, I'm still doing, even though later on in life, after 13 years nearly of constant involvement within the party, I quit the party, and I moved to a new life of different morals and standards and values. On top comes ethics and love and peace, and still the inspiration from the bees goes on. And even like at some point, I wrote a letter to Hezbollah leadership, denoting the black and yellow, you know, the colors of the bee, which are the same color of Hezbollah, and Hezbollah's flag or banner. And basically, what I want to say is that I've written 6 books. One about technical beekeeping, a guide to modern beekeeping in Arabic. That was the first scientific reference to beekeeping in Lebanon in Arabic. And the other books, 3 in Arabic, 1 in English, and that was translated to French and published in Paris, The Bees Road. Well, it's a metaphor, but it tells it all about my life, about Hezbollah, about Lebanon, about the civil war, about the bees in relation to that, about what's going on these days of fighting corruption, about the imbalance in the times where war was against the external enemy, whereas we neglected our societies, our communities, and that's why we drowned lately in garbage and diseases and poison and all that stuff. And basically, my message in my books was all about that, just making a remembrance of the Prophet Muhammad when he welcomed fighters coming from the battlefield, and he said, welcoming you after getting done with the smaller jihad. Well, you still are left with the greater jihad. And they asked him, what's that? He said, that's the jihad of the self. This part has been truly neglected lately by Hezbollah, by a lot of parties, by a lot of decision makers taking care of people's lives, and that caused a lot of suffering, a lot of humiliation, a lot of bad or low lifestyles. At the time, all this should have brought the people to dignity and prosperity and better lives, and that's where my struggle these days is about. Starting with Hezbollah and politics and the civil war, and ending with longing to have a nation, a proper nation, and well, having this nation more connected to the surrounding, and basically bringing people more to peace instead of all this bloodshed. It's a long story. I tried to just make it short. But there's a lot to tell in these books, which one of them was suggested to be a Hollywood movie after a lot of meetings and a lot of correspondence.
Well, I hope it does become
at some point, because the angle was...
Right. No, I hope it does. Listen.
Well, they focused on politics, basically.
I see.
My angle is more about life and different things, and that's why at some point when I got the proposal, I declined going that way. Hopefully, I get some people that see things with a better perspective, more a human sort of thing, and then hopefully movies and a lot of lessons would come out.
Listen, Rami, I really appreciate you sharing your personal story with us.
Yes.
You are undoubtedly one of the most interesting guests we've had on the Newsmakers. Rami Olaik, we wish you all the best. Thanks so much for joining us. That's all for this edition of the Newsmakers with me, Imran Garta. Check out more of our stories on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. Remember to like, follow, and subscribe. Next time, ahead of International Women's Day, we take a look at feminism in 2019. Has the movement achieved all of its aims, or might it have lost its way? Until then, thank you for watching. Bye-bye.